Hi, this is Aura Walker of the Aura Walker Hypnotherapy Show, and I'm coming to you live from Culver City, California, and I'm trying Facebook Live for the first time. It is January 22nd, and I just had to make sure for a minute, make sure that I'm on the right date. Do I know who the president is? I'm in denial about who the president is. Of course, I wanted Uncle Bernie. And it's not too late. We still have time to get someone sane in the White House. But I don't want to start off too controversial. I want to talk about the Women's March. It was the second Women's March on the 20th, just a couple of days ago, and on Saturday. And it was the second International Women's March. And I was really impressed that it has continued and that the numbers were also huge around the world. And it just shows that we are coming into one of the Mayan prophecies, which is the prophecy is that we are in the age, the golden age of the feminine. And the prophecy states that there will be a resurgence of the female presence in society. And many societies in ancient times were matriarchal because of a woman's ability to give birth. And this was not understood by primitive people, how a woman could reproduce or give birth or even go through a cycle without dying. And so, in fact, the oath of celibacy comes from priests castrating themselves to mimic a first menses, if you can believe that. I have a joke that if a man had to go through cramps, they would kill themselves anyway. So I do want to go back to the Women's March. It is amazing that so many women came forward and continued to march. I had actually scheduled a financial seminar on that day. And so I was in a seminar all day, or I would have gone also in support and camaraderie. But I was learning about crunching numbers. Hi, Sarah. And investing in my own financial future. So as a woman, I think it's really important for women to understand finance and how to protect themselves financially. And it's something that I was not taught too much about. My grandfather said, if you can give me a budget, I will give you some help with college money. And so he taught me how to budget, and I'm eternally grateful for that. So I do think it's important to teach both boys and girls how to budget early on and how to manage money. But historically, for women, managing finance and money has not been something that was given to women easily, and still is not. Women in many countries are not allowed to control their finances. So this is something that is ongoing for my own personal education, is how to control my finances in an augmented fashion and to learn as much as I can about it for my own financial well-being in the future as I enter retirement age. Hi, Francesco. So this is my first time on Facebook Live. We've tried many avenues with my producer before, and he thinks that we should try this because it is part of Facebook and it's a free application. So we're going to try it this time. So I'm coming to you from my office in Culver City, and I'm talking about the Women's March and how awesome it is that it continued for the second year in a row, that women really need to be included as a voice. And I'm so thrilled, as are many other women all over the world, that we have this opportunity to step forward and have our voices heard in a unified fashion all over the world, that we are becoming more inclusive socially, and that women showed up again in the hundreds of thousands all over the world. I think we had 500,000, which was maybe 200,000 less than the first one here in Los Angeles. And it's just an amazing thing to see continue, and to be able to bring daughters and even sons, young kids, to these events to show them that there is people power, because people power is voting power. And as we move into the future, we are gaining more power socially by using our collective voices. So I just want to start out by acknowledging what happened this past weekend, that there was the second Women's March, and it looks like this is going to be an ongoing thing. So I'm very pleased about that. I would like to speak today also about meeting people where they're at. So as a practitioner, what I see in my practice is that when people come to me with an issue or problem, I really assess first where they're at so that I can meet them where they're at. So this past Monday, or this past week, I had, actually, it was actually Sunday. I'm sorry, this is Monday. So I'm getting ahead of myself. This past Sunday, I had a young man and his mother come to me, and his mother had some very high expectations of where she wanted him to be, as many parents do. They want their children to excel and do very well in school, as do I. We all do. Once you're a parent, you want your kids to do really well. And the thing is that he was never hitting the mark as high as his mother's expectation. And so my job was to try to get his mother to see exactly where he was at and what he actually could achieve realistically for himself. And the thing is that each and every person has a different learning curve, a different learning ability, a different learning style. So some people process visually, some people process through hearing, auditory, and some people process through having to write things down, which is also visual. It's not just watching people, but also being able to write something down to remember that thing, because it's a hand-eye coordination that's happening when you write, and it's going very deeply into the brain. So it's easier for some people to learn by writing things down. And so it's important, whether you're working with children, to understand how different children learn differently, whether you're working with adults to understand how different adults hear differently, and whether it's in business or personal, to understand and observe how someone is paying attention to you. They may have their back to you, but they're listening to everything that you are saying, and it may even be surprising how much they're picking up, and that means that they're usually an auditory learner, or they may have to look at you. So in the seminar that I was in just this past weekend as well, we all had name tags, of course, and I'm one of those people that has to look at somebody's name at least 3 times before I remember their name. You could tell me your name if I don't know you a bunch of times, and I may not necessarily remember your name. I think women are multitaskers. I don't know if I have ADD, but I know that I am processing lots of information at once all the time. And so I may be kind of focusing on what someone's saying rather than paying attention to what their name is, or focusing on something going on in the room. So, you know, we have all of these senses that we're managing all at once, and each person processes information in a different manner. And so why am I bringing this up? Because while I was in the seminar, it was a very long seminar where we're crunching numbers all day long. And so it's stressful to do something like that over a repetitive amount of time. I mean, it was kind of fun once we got into it, but I noticed how different people in the seminar, adults who are professionals, even though they're seasoned in their professions, how they were crunching the numbers, how they learned the different learning styles that they have. And even the group leader, the teacher of the class, brought this up, that everybody's wired differently. And it's important for all of us to take note of that. You know, of course, it's obvious when you're dealing with people with disabilities, it's very obvious that they have special needs and that they're wired differently. But we take it for granted when we're dealing with family members or our children or even friends that we know, and we might lose our temper or, you know, get impatient with people if they're not keeping up with the pace that we expect of them. And so it's important that we just pay attention to where people are at and meet them where they're at. So, for example, I've talked about this before. People will say, can you make me do this? Can you make me quit smoking? Can you make me lose weight? And I'm very clear, I cannot make anyone do anything. But if I meet them where they're at, I can assess what their needs and their goals are, and I can more readily help them to get to where they want to be within the range of their capacity and realistically within the range of their capacity. So with this family that I was working with, you know, I really had to make it very clear that their son was telling me and his parents that the parents just couldn't hear it or see it. And so as a professional, they can maybe hear it from a third party, which is myself. that he's telling them very clearly that he is not able to meet those expectations that they had set up for him, and that they need to bring down their expectations down to where he's at so that he can thrive and do the best that he can in his capacity. And I see this a lot with children. For example, children below the age of 10 do not really have the skills for long-term reasoning. So they may not understand cause and effect as well as parents expect them to. And the first thing is you got to turn off everything, the TV, the radio, whatever, video games, if you want a child to pay attention to you, because when there's too many distractions, they're not going to pay attention. And many adults are like that as well, right? They just look at their phone or whatever. And that's natural to want to kind of take a little mental break and look at something else for a minute. It's our natural instinct kicking in. Back in the day with primitive man, you had to pay attention because there might be a lion in the corner who's going to attack you, or there might be a rabbit that's going to be dinner. So, you know, it is our natural instinct to pay attention to all these little details that are happening all over the place. So you want to limit distractions with children to get their attention, and then speak to them very directly and give them very limited choices, especially when they're under the age of 10. And so in counseling parents, I always say, you know, keep your expectations to the age of your child and what they are able to achieve at that time. And it's the same with adults, whether you're dealing with a friend, a partner, or a parent. And as our parents get older and they start to lose their memory, this is one of the things that is very common, that we don't adjust our expectations of our parents or elderly who are starting to lose their abilities. And we do it when we see that it's become so obvious, but sometimes there's subtle changes where we see that they're not keeping up the way that they used to. And even with spouses or partners, if somebody's tired, so the acronym that I use to show people when people are most vulnerable and not hitting all their marks is hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or HALT. And that is the acronym that's used for 12-step recovery, that people are most apt to relapse or be their worst when they're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And the thing is, people have different rhythms and needs for when they need to eat. Not everybody needs to eat. In fact, most people are still intrinsically able to do or function better on a foragers type of cycle, which is our ancient ancestors' eating cycles, which is little handfuls of food throughout the day. So if you look at your stomach is about as big as your hand. And if you eat just a handful of food every hour to every 3 hours, you're actually going to be sustaining yourself more the way that your primitive ancestors did. And this is actually a way that our bodies are still wired today. So modern society has dictated around the 8-hour work schedule that we need to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but that's not necessarily the best thing for everybody. And so if you're a parent of a young child, paying attention to how your child asks to eat and what they ask to eat and when they ask to eat is important, because again, that has to do with where they're at and what their needs are at. And it's the same with adults. Not every adult needs to eat 3 meals a day. And as people age, their need for food also diminishes. Not that they don't need nutrition, they might need more intense nutrition in smaller doses. And powerful doses of nutrition. So a dose of vegetables or protein or calcium in smaller doses. And seeing how people's needs change is also meeting them where they're at, right? So this is my message today based on what I have seen and noticed in my practice and in my personal life, dealing with different generations of people and meeting them where they're at. As our kids become teenagers, they want more independence. And of course, we were all teenagers if we're adults now. But as a parent of a teenager, I'm assessing where my teen is at. She's wanting more independence. And I got a lot of independence as a teenager, probably too much. But I'm really seeing that my teen, as much as she's asking for that, cannot handle it. And so balancing and giving her that leeway, but at the same time in a respectful way where she feels that she's getting some of her independence needs met, and yet she's still being safe. And so the next topic I want to go into is safety, because also circling back to the Women's March, safety for children in particular. Children who are not supervised are the ones who are the most vulnerable and who end up getting either abducted or physically or sexually abused by strangers or people that they know who are out of control and who should not be around them. And the same is, true for elderly abuse. Of course, if we're adults who are functioning, not adults with special needs, then we need to take care of our own safety. And this is something that I'm indoctrinating into my teenager based on what I learned by the seat of my pants. I grew up in New York City, and I learned how to keep myself safe just by tips from other kids, particularly streetwise kids who taught me how to be safe. For example, for a woman walking down a unfamiliar street, you always want to walk down the middle of that street, never by the hedges or shadows or darkened doorways, always down the center of the street with your arms swinging back and forth. And this is body language that if anybody tries anything, you're going to fight back. So it's important to learn how to keep ourselves safe and to have those talks with each other and our children, how to keep them safe. And of course, with vulnerable adults, whether they're elderly or disabled, this is also a big issue. It's a big issue that's not talked about, which is elder abuse in retirement homes, and also the abuse of people with special needs. One of the most sad and painful sessions that I ever did was with a caseworker who was private, who brought in a Down syndrome adult woman who had been raped in a group home. And I ended up having to do art therapy with her because she did not have the cognitive or verbal skills to be able to tell us what had happened, but she drew it. And it was very obvious to me that she had been assaulted. So this is a population that actually needs extra help to be monitored, to be kept safe, just like the elderly, as people with dementia and other issues when they're older are not able to protect themselves as much. So vulnerable populations, which is children, disabled, and adults with who are elderly with dementia or other issues because they're getting very old and their bodies are falling apart. These are the populations that actually need a lot of help. I am actually going to enroll my daughter in a martial arts class, and I recommend this for all young mothers, women, and teenagers and for young men too. So the rate of sexual assault is 50% of all girls, and I think that is decreasing as women and girls are becoming more educated and are taking self-defense classes. The numbers for men are I would say, they say it's 1 in 6. I think it's maybe closer to 1 in 4. So it's always about power and control. It's never just about sex, right? So when we talk about sex, it's adult consensual sex. When we talk about sex, the word sex, sexual assault is always about power and control. It's about one person trying to get empowered by dominating another person. So, hi, Daphne. These are all my peeps, my New York peeps, and my Colorado peeps, and my New Mexico peeps. I love having these connections all over the world. It's fabulous. So I'm just talking now about safety and protecting vulnerable populations and ourselves. This is an issue that's up for me and my teenage daughter, and I recommend self-defense classes for people of all ages, of course, not someone who's 90, but to educate people to be able to ask for help and meeting people where they're at, right? So this is one of the topics that I was talking about, is meeting people where they're at. And so with my teenage daughter who wants independence, this is one of the requirements that I have for her to gain more independence, is learning self-care and safety so that I can prepare her for going out into the world and learning how to be safe. So these are some of the big social changes that we're seeing. We're seeing with the Women's March, more women coming together, unified, speaking out in one voice that's unifying all women all over the world about issues that all women everywhere face, which one of them is personal safety. And then I was talking also about financial security, which is really important for all women everywhere. It's important for everybody. As we see these political issues come up where what we're supposed to be taking care of, like we are supposed to be taken care of by the elected officials who we put into office or hope to get into office. And then there are ones, of course, that get into office for other circumstances, by other circumstances out of our control, as we see right now in the United States and, of course, in other countries with dictatorships, that we have to take control of our own well-being and our own safety and speak out. And so I'm very happy to see this happening on a large scale. It's the only way that we're going to have social security, not in terms of social security numbers, but social security in terms of our social security and welfare, is when we come together in large numbers. And that's a vision that I know that certain people that I respect in politics, like Bernie Sanders, has that vision. That's his vision. That's his platform, that everybody will come out socially. The masses, the working class, will come out and have more power and lead their own nations, and that we won't have this minority dictating to us what our rights are. And that starts at home, it starts in our communities, and that starts with self-empowerment. And so that brings me back to, you know, taking care of our own welfare, taking care of our own finances, taking care of our children's welfare, educating our children on how to take care of themselves, teaching our children about money and finance, teaching our children about social safety and respect for ourselves and each other. So these are some of the topics that I address personally in my own life, that I actually practice socially in my community and also in my work, in my private practice, that I notice where people are at, I meet them where they're at, and I help them to progress from where they are at. So if they're showing me that they can only handle a certain amount, that's where I meet them at, and I go from there with them. I don't try to push them too much further ahead. And if I've pushed with a personal friend of mine or someone close to me who can't go further than they can go, then, you know, I feel, okay, well, I've exhausted my resources with this person, and I've got to pull back and back off and let them take the initiative now, because people have to be able to help themselves as well. That's the first rule of healing, is you can't pull somebody up out of the gutter unless they give you their hand and reach out for you to pull them up. That's the number one rule of being a helper in the healing arts, is that you have to know who is willing to accept the help. So that's my show for today. It often sounds like I'm on a soapbox, but it is my passion and my inspiration for each show each week, is what is happening in current events, how I'm relating to it in my own personal practice and my own life, and sharing those ideas with the public. So if you're interested in learning more about my work, my videos are on YouTube, and my website, aurawalkerhypnotherapy.com. And this video is Facebook Live, but it's also for my radio show, which is streaming live radio show on Radio Buzzed, BUZZD, radiobuzz.com. The show will re-air there at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time every single day. So if you have any questions, if you've enjoyed me presenting on these topics, feel free to send me your questions, and I hope to see you soon again next week. So thank you very much for joining me. Lots of love to all my peeps out there. Love you guys. Thanks for logging in, and I'll catch you real soon. Cheers.